Nope.
Howdy, y'all. Welcome to a special episode of Contagious Smiles Unstoppable. Here with Eric Cochran, founder CEO of Cochran Strong.
Did he say your last name right?
Yes, actually, you nailed it.
Wow.
Nobody ever gets it right.
My husband is very redneck in his vocabulary, so I was a little worried he would botch it.
No, he got it right.
I'm very proud of you. Eric has a story that is going to really be a hard one to tell. As you know, we both have law enforcement backgrounds, and so does Eric. And I want to thank you for your service before we go any further.
Appreciate it.
What you did and what you went through. When I watched the video, I watched it the first time, and I want you to tell because it's your story. And the first time I watched it, I was like, even with decades of being in law enforcement and in that community. And then I watched it again and I saw everything that you and I and Solomon and I talked about off air because I was only watching you at that point in the beginning. Tell us what happened and just how you overcame what you went through.
I started my law enforcement career in 2005. I spent 6 years as a reserve deputy, and I actually got hired full-time in Ross County, Ohio, which is the main city is Chillicothe, which was actually the first capital of Ohio and the third capital of Ohio. So it's a larger community, but it's still small. Maybe we have about 100 deputies that work in our sheriff's office, but we share our office with the city police department. So it was November 17th. It was 2022. It was around 5 p.m. Everybody had gone home. I went in to just quickly knock a report out, and then I was going to head home myself. And I was the guy I was a sergeant, and I was the guy when my guys would come in and they didn't have their vest on, even if they were in the building, I'd give them crap. Well, I took mine off and threw it in the truck because I was only going to be there 5 minutes. And we took our cruisers home. So I was just, I was just going to go to the house. There was a knock on the back door, and I answered the back door, which was not uncommon. It's the jail is in that building. The city police are there. We're in there. People were looking where to pay bonds and put money on books and, things like that. Well, obviously, it's the sheriff's department, so it's home. I'm comfortable, So I answer the door, and a guy says to me that he wants some more officers. It was not uncommon for that to happen too. We had bars closed, bars fights happen, but it was also they were setting up for the Christmas season, and there was a Dora. We have I don't know if you have that down where you're at, but it was called Dora. It's like a drink and stroll, just to promote local businesses. They let you come down. There's a certain area you can get an adult beverage and walk around downtown as long as you stay within that corridor. So there's probably a couple hundred people downtown that evening, and I never go there. Like, the bosses find me and they're like, "Oh, you have nothing to do. You're in the office, so here you go." So I was trying to be quick, and at the time I was the only armed person in the building, and the only other people were jailers and the dispatch for the city and the dispatch for the county. So when he said he wanted more officers, it was like, okay, I'm it, So I asked him why, and he told me that somebody was holding his family hostage, and they were telling him he had to hurt kids. Well, being that I was at the sheriff's office, I just kind of went into that OODA loop that we're trained not to go into. And he produced a firearm and pointed it at me. I drew my firearm and I used the door as cover. And when I didn't shoot him immediately, he fired a shot off, which struck the glass next to me. And then I returned fire, and he unfortunately lost his life. And the last shot that I made tipped him back, and his muscle reaction just pulled the trigger because finger was still on the trigger. And he made it through a 6-inch gap and shot me in the left of the upper torso, went through my lung, through my diaphragm, and completely through my liver, and stuck in my right hip. So I was air flighted to Columbus, which is Ohio's capital. So it's very large, and there's a lot of hospitals up there. But they sent me to the best one, and that was Grant. So I was flown there, And at 1 o'clock in the morning, they sent my family home and said, get some rest, things like that. At 4 o'clock, they called him and said, he's circling the drain. You better get here fast. And they sent cops to like my mom's house and had them bring her back because it was that desperate. I had 2 complete transfusions. I was placed in a medically induced coma for 8 days. I had 10 surgeries because there were so many holes. They couldn't find all the leaks, and they think they get them, and then they show another one. So they left me open for about 10 days, and I just had this like medical film over me. So there were a number of procedures after that, and I spent 27 days total in the hospital. And when I was going home, they said to me, well, we'll get somebody to talk to you. It'll be about 8 months. We're back done. And I, point blank told the lady, I said, I'll commit suicide before that. I just got shot, almost lost my life. I took another man's life. And this wasn't somebody we were hunting. This wasn't somebody who had a criminal record. This was a guy who was military vet. He saw action in Afghanistan and Iraq, and he was in bad shape. And he was having probably the absolute worst day he's ever had, and he didn't know how to handle it. And suicide by cop was the only thing he could think of because he knew the voices were going to get the best of him at some point. And I told the lady, I said, this is unacceptable. And it was 3 weeks before I could find a clinician to even talk to me. And that was a long 3 weeks dealing with it on my own. My department, we had only had a couple shootings in our county over the history. One officer lost his life and the other one was a minor shooting. So we didn't know how to handle it. We didn't know what to do. There was no playbook. And that upset me. And my journey wasn't just at the time, was not just a journey for my health, but it was a journey for my faith, because I was trying to figure out why I was placed in that position. Why would God do this to me? And after many months of therapy and a lot of soul searching and watching the video in slow motion and picking up on small cues that his intent was never to hurt me. His intent was to get a reaction. And when he didn't get the reaction he wanted from me, because I don't know why I didn't shoot, I'll be honest, as soon as he drew the gun, I don't know why. I think it's because I had guns pointed at me before and I'd always walked away, and it had always ended with nobody getting hurt. And I was probably just like, hey, this is just another one. I just got to talk him down. And after all of that, I realized that I was the person that was meant to do something different than what I was doing at that moment in the bigger picture. So I started the Cochran Strong Foundation with some help, obviously. And the goal, really, we weren't sure what we were going to do. All I knew is I had to do something. There were people counting on me. I'm very stubborn. I'm known in the community at this point. Everybody knows my name. And I thought to myself, I have to do something. There has to be something I can do. So I made a 5-year plan. And the 5-year plan was we were going to provide medical therapy as well as other therapy, but we were going to pay for it, because Ross County is a small county and many of our EMT and firefighters are volunteer. And they work for multiple departments because they don't get full-time status and they don't get insurance. So they're feeding families, they're clothing kids, they're paying bills. They don't have that extra money for a $15 copay to go get their head checked out. And that hit me kind of hard when I've been trying to do this for 10 years, and that was never my focus before. But when I got the focus, it suddenly became this rush to get it done. I had it completed and started by year 3. My board, I put together an amazing board, and they looked at me after year 2 and said, can we hurry this up? You're just spinning wheels. You have to get this done. And that was kind of a motivator for me, because all we were doing was small events and basically giving money to little places here and there. And they said, you have a skill and you're not using it. and we think you need to. And I agreed with them. And I happened to be at a wedding, and I was sitting at the table, and I was talking to a guy, and he says, "What do you do for a living?" And I said, "I'm a retired deputy. I got shot." And he goes, "Really?" And he goes, "Well, who's your therapist?" So we were kind of talking about that. And he looks at me and he goes, "I'm a therapist. I would love to touch base with you and really do something for your first responders. I've been trying to get my foot in the door, and I can't let anybody, or nobody will let me, really talk to them." And we sat down, and within a week, we had a game plan. We wrote it like a playbook. It is a 12-step playbook that we can hand to anybody, not say anything, walk away. You can do it in 30 days. All you need is money and clinicians. We've done all the other stuff. We have telehealth, so you're not seen going in and out of the office. We have a dedicated phone line for first responders. It's answered within 2 hours if it's after hours or they're not able to get to the phone right there. You get a phone assessment within 24 hours. Your first appointment, if it's emergent, is within 48 hours. If it's non-emergency, we can work around your schedule. But we also build it in so that the departments have a use for it too, because if they have a vested interest in it, they're going to promote it. And what we did there was, if a department has somebody who's maybe shows up and they're hungover, or their work performance is affected by something that they've seen or done, or they've had a huge incident at their agency, or an officer's gotten hurt, the department can hand them a card and say, "Call them right now, sit down and call them, make your appointment, and you're on administrative leave, light duty, whatever it is they need to do until you have your first assessment." And under Ohio law, the clinicians are covered for, your information, and it's also HIPAA covered. And the department can call after 48 hours and say, "Did he or she make her appointment?" Yes. Are they fit for duty? They can tell them yes or no. That's it. They don't find anything else out. They don't know if they're returning. They don't know if they're getting additional services outside of the clinician. They don't know if they're, talking about family matters or work matters. It is completely 100% anonymous. I get a form that says, "I would like some financial assistance." I see your name on it, and we don't even call the department and check with administration. I call in the middle of the day and say, "Hey, is John there?" "Yeah, he's in the back." "Okay." And I can check that way. If you're on the schedule, then you're active. So I don't need to talk to an administrator. There's many ways to do this. And it was supposed to be first responders. And then there was an incident in my own home where one of my kids came to me and said, "I don't feel right." And I thought, "What do you mean you don't feel right?" And he said to me, "Every time you leave, I'm afraid you won't come home." And you want to talk about getting hit in the side of the head with a bag of bricks. And I thought, we never thought about that. Like, we never thought about the kids. We just figured they just, he got shot, he's a big hero, and everything's fine. No, they were worried every time I walked out that door to go to the grocery store that something was going to happen to me. So we started to build it for children and spouses. We are doing retirees finally. We have 2 big prisons here in Chillicothe. We're starting to do those guys because all these guys are vets, and they're related to the trauma that's happening in our community these days. So we started grouping them together, and then I was approached by a couple different groups, and that was nurses. We're doing nurses from the COVID era now and from the ER. And the one that really got us was we're doing tow truck drivers, because those guys are asked to do a lot of things and see a lot of things, and we forget that they're there when the emergency is happening. And so we were like, where are we going to get money from? Well, the clinician I approached the county commissioners. They get an opioid fund from the big pharma settlement every year. And we showed stats that show opioid use and mental health, how they're connected, how the domestic violence rate amongst first responders is so high, the divorce rate is so high, how different addictions, because there's a lot of addictions people don't think are addictions, and they're trauma responses. They really are. And when you start studying this, like I have over the last couple of years, you realize that a lot of things you did in the past were trauma responses and you thought it was just you being silly. And even the reaction to different things when you go to calls was trauma response from my childhood. So our goal is to be the leader in this. And there are many groups out there, don't get me wrong, and they do wonderful things. There's retreats and seminars and all this stuff. And everybody has their niche. And that's not mine. And I realized that right from the beginning. That's not me. Finding money, finding help, talking to the first responders, being a peer counselor, that's my niche. Because I could talk to anybody. There was a running joke for many years. Everywhere I went, I knew somebody, even if I wasn't, aware that I knew him yet.
I'm that guy.
And yeah, and I thought, well, then why don't I use that?
Mhm.
And so I literally go around and give speeches for crisis intervention training. And if I'm driving along and I see a fire department and there's cars out front, I go in the front door with a stack of cards and say, "Here, boys, you knuckleheads," and I call them all knuckleheads because that's what they are. We're all just stubborn, We don't want to be seen as weak, but we also want help. So when you offer them the help, they look at you like, "Well, I don't need it. He needs it. I don't need it." No, everybody needs it. And people say, "Well, your shooting was so horrible," and blah blah blah. It was. Don't get me wrong, but it's still the same thing everybody else is going through. There's a process of finding a quality of life, and we are asking these folks to see the most horrific things during the day and then go home and be the perfect spouse, and that's not feasible. So we have to give them the tools to survive. Not just the job, but to survive their family. I heard Travis Howells was giving a speech and he was talking about how he was talking to his family. I don't know if you're familiar with Travis Howells.
Mm-mm.
He's very popular. We're going to see him next month, actually, in Ohio. He's very popular. He's a former first responder, and he's very blunt. He's kind of like me, just tells it how it is, But he was telling a story, and I thought to myself, we go home and we act the way we do with our spouses because we don't think we can be fired. Because if we act that way at work, we're going to get fired. But guess what? You could be fired from your marriage. Your spouse could say, "I'm done." So we act that way because we think it's safe, but we also think it's invincible. Like, well, you're not going to do anything. You're just going to let me do what I'm. No, that only goes on for so long. So bringing the spouses into the fold and the children into the fold allows them to have a home life that not only they are in control of, but the other parties understand, okay, this is why he's acting this way. This is why dad's yelling at me, because the only way dad knows how to get something done is to yell. Shut up, sit there on the ground. Like that's the only way we know how to talk. And so not only do we have to change the mindset of the first responder, but we have to change the family dynamic. And offering services to them and letting them go in and have group sessions with their family members is a tool that we've never thought about before. And trust me, I am not the prettiest crayon in the box, but I am the smartest when it comes to this stuff. And I should not be the one thinking of this stuff. This should be a 20-year-old program that we're trying to tweak. And in a nutshell, being a first responder was the pinnacle of my life until I was no longer one. And I realized it wasn't the pinnacle, that being the sheepdog for the sheepdogs is the pinnacle.
Mm.
And being able to do this for them is therapeutic for me because I get to work through my grief by telling my story repeatedly, which you think would be worse, but it's actually better for the mind. There's a study that was done, and I can't tell you the exact study, but that's led to EMRD or EMDR, excuse me. And when I did the EMDR, I mean, it was an amazing tool. Are you familiar with it?
A little bit.
One of you shaking your head, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll let her explain. I'll let her explain it to you later. But but it's an amazing tool, and it really does work. And the premise of it is, if you don't talk about it, and you're forced to talk about it, or you're asked to talk about it, then one side of your brain locks up because it thinks it's a no subject. Where if you talk about it more, the more you talk about, the more comfortable you are with at least being able to bring it up without locking up, without having anxiety and all those things that go along with it. And it's amazing how something as simple as a clicking noise can make the brain work, because the brain is so fragile and we never know when we're going to snap. You know, it could be a big thing or a small thing.
Eric, let me ask you a couple questions. I'm sure our listeners are wondering, the individual who came to the precinct that night, did you ever find out whether or not his family were in fact taken hostage?
No, there was no hostage. He was, I think it was the stress of war. And we found, our investigators found his journal, and there was only one entry about kids. It was very recent to the event, and it was very vague. So we feel maybe that was something new, because his significant other had no idea that he was talking about those things, but she was aware of the mental health issues. And his other family members that were kind of distant from me because of the mental health issues, they were just, um, they were very distant because the way he was acting, and they had their own families to protect, and that's understandable. But the thing I got from it was he was a great guy. Like, he was the nicest guy to do for anybody. And that hit me hard when I found that out, because, like I said before, he wasn't some guy who was wanted for murder or, you know, felony domestic violence or something where we needed to be on our toes and make sure that, you know, we did everything we could for the victims. This was a guy who was hurting, and he didn't know what else to do. And I think I was put in his path to change my path. And I was getting burnt out. I was done. I was I was basically going to calls going, what do you want? Like, I was done with the silliness. I was done with, you know, hey, the neighbor cut one line of grass over my yard. Like, really? That's why you called us out? You know, well, why didn't you go talk to him? Well, because he's a scary guy. And then I go over and he's the nicest guy in the world. And he's like, oh, I wasn't paying attention. I'm in music. I'm like, really? You drug me all the way out here? You know, we're running, you know, 3 and 4 deputies for the second largest county in Ohio. And I'm out here dealing with a neighbor dispute that wasn't a neighbor dispute. You know, I was tired and I was burnt out. And I think that was a call to do this and find another path. And even though I'm not doing this full time, every day, I do something. I make a phone call. I do brother and sister checkups. Every day I pick 5 people and I send a text message to them. And the only thing I say is checkup. And they're first responders 90% of the time. In the beginning, I was doing them, and I would get people say, oh, I'm good, I'm good, I'm good. And then it became, when they would get another one from me, they'd say, man, I'm glad you texted me today. Like, I really needed somebody to talk to, or I'm good, but I know a guy, or I needed that. It was enough to get me through the day. And then I started receiving them back, which that was telling me that they were doing it. And we talked the other day, and I said 1 becomes 10, 10 becomes 100 kind of thing. And now I get them from people I don't even know sometimes. And they'll say, we heard your story, check up. Are you okay? Do you need anything? And these are people who don't know me. When I went through the original incident, I got letters from almost every state in the United States, from people who don't even know me. There were families of first responders, people who just saw the story, people who just wanted to send me $5 in case I needed something. But the schools here were amazing. All the kids knew me because I would walk the schools. I worked at the day shift. They sent me letters, and one kid at the career center, who's a law enforcement career kid, she made this paper rose that was blue. And I saw her the other day. She said, do you still have the rose? And I said, yes, the rose is still at my house. I still have it. And that was 4 years ago almost. And she is a deputy now. She's working in our jail. And to see that impact, that things that happened to me, she could have easily said, nope, I'm done. I know this guy. He comes in, he talks to us all the time. He gives us little pep talks and works out with us. I can't do this. But it was the opposite. She said it made her want to do it more because now she sees what I'm doing, and I'm like that's a weird way to find out your impact in this world. And then I found out there were two other deputies that work in our department who I ran into as juveniles, and they've recently said, "Yeah, you don't remember dealing with me when I was a kid?" And I'm like, "Barely." And they're deputies now, so we have an impact on people that we don't understand sometimes, and uh, if we don't use our skills like you guys and I are doing, then nobody else is going to do it. There's no SWAT team for mental health,
Right.
Mhm.
Do your peer-to-peer therapists, do they get paid or they volunteered?
I am doing it strictly volunteer. When I give speeches, if they offer to pay me, I ask them for the donation for the foundation instead.
What about the
Um,
individuals who talk to people and are treatment?
they're volunteers. They're really guys and gals that have worked with me over the years and have said, "What do you need me to do?" And I'm like, "Well, listen, you can talk the lady in white gloves into a chocolate sandwich, chocolate ice cream sandwich. So I need you to kind of keep your phone nearby, and I'm gonna send some people to you." And then they get these relationships with these people because they're able to do what I do. But they're also hurting themselves, and they've come back to me and said, "I didn't realize how therapeutic it was to help others. I get to tell my story safely to somebody who understands and isn't going to judge me, but I'm also able to say, I know what I'm talking about."
That's amazing. That's amazing. What can our listeners do to help support?
Well, everybody runs on money. We use our funds to do events. We have a event coming up here in September, on September 13th. It's our fourth annual softball game. And of course, that requires us to use money to buy shirts and do all these other things. But we do a dinner in the wintertime, which raises funds strictly for the the mental health fund that we use. So we're always looking for donations, but we're also always looking for people who want to come to events and support our first responders because, like with our softball game, I tell our committee, I don't care if you make $1 on the softball game. I want you to get me 100, 200 people there to watch the game to show our first responders that they're loved and they're thought about. But I also want the first responders to make that connection with the public that they're just people.
Right.
We do the same things you do. Just because we wear a uniform doesn't mean that we're Superman and doesn't mean that we're not fun. And there's antics during these games. I'm telling you, one year they stood on top of the dugout with a donut over the cops, and the firemen kept walking it up and down the down the dugout. The troopers showed up one year and wrote a ticket to the fire pitcher because he was pitching too slow, so they wrote him for impeding traffic. I mean, it is it is
Hilarious.
antics and good time, and it's a good way for the community to go, "These people are fun. We
Yeah.
need to pay more attention to them because they always see us when something's wrong, and then they see us when we're at our worst
Right.
because you want me to come solve an argument for you and tell your spouse what to do when I can't get my spouse what to do what I want her to do." You know what I mean? Like, you want me to come here and tell your wife to act right, and mine doesn't act right. So just because I'm wearing this uniform, she's not going to listen to me. Sorry, bud. But they also see us when we've come from car crashes, when we've come from deaths, and we're trying to give the air that everything is okay and that what's going on in their world is the absolute most important thing right now when we're trying to process what happened 10 minutes ago. And they don't understand that, nor do some people care.
Right.
We got to change that mindset too. We need them to see that I'm just a man. I go home, my kids act out. My spouse is mad at me. The lawn still needs mowed. I still have to go do X, Y, and Z. Like, they need to see that we're people. And once they do that, they give us a little more leeway when we do make mistakes because we do make mistakes. We are human. We're not perfect. You can send me to all the training in the world and you're not going to fix some of the things that I do and some of the things that I say sometimes. So, when we get the public on board, even if they're doing it at their local level, in getting our information to the first responders there and saying, here's a guy that has some clinical help and he's doing it by telehealth, so you can do it from California. Do you want this card? Or we got these cards sent to us. Take some, hand them out to your guys. You're going to find the guy who's hiding the trauma right now, who's drinking too much, who's putting on that everything is fine. When he goes home and he falls apart, he'll have that in front of him. So we would like to receive emails at our Cochran at cochranstrong.org, and I'll get all that information to you, obviously. But we want people to ask for our digital copy of those and start getting that information out, because I'm retired. I'm not going to drive all across the country, but I can help people from everywhere, And if we can get more people getting the help in different areas, then they'll start building this program themselves because they'll see the results and they'll become peer counselors, hopefully. And, if we can save a life a day, a life a week, a life a month, a life a year, then we're doing our job, and that's the big thing, is getting the information out. And we will be more than happy if a department wants to look at our program. I'll send them the whole thing. I don't want any compensation for it. I just want you to use it, tweak it, whatever works for your area, whatever works for your clinicians. I don't care. It's yours. Because if I can't get to you and you can do it, and we could save somebody's life, or we can make somebody's marriage last and be a quality of life, then we're doing our job. And that's all I care about.
When you think about it, and officers have to do in-service training every year, they're not doing anything for mental health. They're not doing anything. I mean, you've got down in Georgia, you have firearms where you have to requalify, and then you have to do your CPR, first aid, first responder training. But what do you do about, first of all, I think there needs to be special needs training in there. Like when you go into an environment with someone who's autistic and you automatically think that he's being aggressive, but he's not. And you go hands-on when you don't have to be. We don't listen to the advocate. We don't listen to the parent when they could say, you know what, here's the best way to approach. Here's what's going on. He's not aggressive. He's not a threat to you, but he's, high active, autistic. These are things that need to be done. The fact that I think that there should be, a mental health day for the officers, even if it's quarterly, to give them something, because they have nothing. I mean, they have nothing.
Ohio is actually a leader in those two areas. And surprisingly, they deal with I don't know the program off the top of my head, because it's kind of out of the loop now, but they have actually started teaching how to deal with autism, how to deal with kids and young adults who have not only mental disorders, but physical disorders. And one of those initiatives is they started allowing the deputy sheriffs to wear a blue badge that has an autism symbol in the center where the seal of Ohio would go. And one of our deputies actually has an autistic son, and he wears it all the time. They're permitted to do that. We wear pink badges in October, that for breast cancer awareness. So the heart is there, and the wheels are starting to roll, and obviously they roll slow, but it's nice to see that they're finally allowing us to be people with people. Because when you go see a 10-year-old kid who is on, the middle of the spectrum, and he's in love with police officers, he wants to touch everything on your belt, our first reaction is no, 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 no. And to be able to say, okay, I can let him play with the handcuffs, or I can let him do a couple of things, that's going to go a long way towards him building a relationship with you. We had a young lady in our area who we did the very same thing with. We brought her badges and stickers and all kinds of stuff. And she would run away from home, and the first place she would go would be down by the creek, and she would always sit there because she knew we would come look there. And When she would run away, she would never go anywhere else. She would go right to that spot. And we would never go to the house first. We would go to her first. And we would spend time with her. One or two of us would get there, make sure she's okay. One of us would stand there and talk to her. She'd get in the car. We'd let her ride up front. We'd take her back to the house. And by the time we got her home, she was so settled down that she didn't even remember what was going on that caused her to run off. And this has been ongoing for about 10 years now. And she's a young adult. And when she lives in a halfway house, and when she runs away, we know where to go look for her. There's never been any other place she's gone, with one exception. And that was because she was so angry, she walked past it and then got lost and didn't know where she was. And luckily, she was near the road. We found her quickly, but she always goes to the same place. And we started realizing, okay, this is how we deal with her. We know her pattern now, because patterns are huge for them. And we have to lower our voices, and we have to not come in lights and sirens. Once we got one or two guys learning that, we started telling the other guys, like, hey, when you get called for Jess, go down here. Don't come in lights and sirens. Don't raise your voice. Talk to her nicely. Give her 5 minutes. She'll want a hug. Put her in the front seat. She'll be ready to go home. How simple is that?
Right.
And now that we're finally teaching that, the parents have become a lot more connected to the officers. And some of the officers will even go, here's my number. If there's a problem and you feel it's getting ready to jump off, call me. And if I'm working, I'll head this way. If I'm not working, I'll send somebody. Like, we've never had that before.
Right.
We've always been so standoffish, and it was never our job before. We would say, oh, you're the parent, that's your job. But now we realize the influence that we have, not just on the person in trauma, but the person who's dealing with them on day to day, who is exhausted, is been dealing with this for years. They're at their wits' end. Some of them don't have any kind of respite. And we're lucky to have the Pioneer Center here in our community where they do offer those things. They offer respite. They'll bring somebody in and let the parent go shop. They'll do a program for the kids. They have classes and all this. They have an whole entire school for these kids where they can go and they get the best treatment as humans and not as people who are broken.
Yeah.
These kids at this school, that was one of my favorite schools, because the minute I walked in the door, every kid at the other end of the building knew I was there.
Mhm.
Because they would literally, it was like telephone. It would make it to the other end of the building before I would, and they'd be standing in the doorway waiting to see me. And it was the best, because I got all the hugs in the world, number one. But number two, they were always so sweet, to the point where when I walked out, I kept thinking to myself, man, this is the best place for them to be. Their teachers love them. They're always respected. They're always taken care of. There's never any issues here. We don't come here for bad things. Those kids don't act out because they're taken care of and they're treated right. And when they do act out, the staff there knows how to handle it swiftly. And a lot of communities don't have that. So, and dealing with the elderly is another one. That's another dimension. Alzheimer's is a whole nother beast that has slowly become the cops' problem now. And we get there, we don't know what to do. And we've got a spouse that's at a wit's end because the person they love is acting like a person they've never met, and acting that they've never met them. And so how do you handle both of them at the same time? And how do you walk away? Like, there's a point where you have to break off, but how do you do it? Because I'm going to tell you, there's been times I've been stuck in houses because I don't know how to say goodbye. I'm standing there looking at them going, what can I do? But I don't want to leave you. And, the old days, we used to take people who had mental health issues to the jail and throw them in a cell. And, they were vulnerable, number one, to the animals in there. Forgive the term, but that's what it was. They were predators. They saw these folks come in, and it was a good way to get something or manipulate them or whatever it may be. And now we've lost a lot of our mental health facilities that we used to have. And that's become our problem, and taking them to jail is not an option anymore. we've actually said that to people. Like, I can't take them to jail. Like, they don't have the mental capacity to handle what's going on in there as much as you want me to take them away. I can't, because I have a duty to protect them, even if they are not in the best condition at the moment and they're not provided with another solution. But I just can't make jail an option. And that's another issue that the state of Ohio has been dealing with here lately, is trying to find ways to involve our counselors and stuff without putting them in danger. That's a big one too. Counselors and clinicians for these folks, they're tired too. Everybody's tired, and they want to push it off on somebody else, but it needs to be a collective working so that we can all get a little bit of respite at some point.
Well, Eric, we commend you for everything that you're doing and are going to do here in the future, buddy. Like my wife Victoria said, if we can help you out, let us know. Our listeners out there, they have a big heart. They've been following us for years, and give us all your info. We'll put it connected to the podcast here, and hopefully you'll get some phone calls or emails here.
And we absolutely are becoming friends and bonding together. So this is not the last you will see of Eric.
Yeah.
I commend you guys for what you're doing, because
Thank you.
I'm a little guy, in the big stack of things, and to have folks like you to help me get this word out, to help even to help me, sometimes I might need somebody to call that understands, and to have a sounding board goes a long way for a lot of people. Some people handle things well and they just need a tune up. They just need the oil checked, and sometimes they just, they lose it. So when you're looking at the bigger picture of things, the more folks we can have involved, the better. And because I get along with this guy over here, but I might like this guy over here or this gal over here, and we may connect like with you guys. And now we're friends, and now we're doing things together, and we're working for the betterment of this guy over here, even though maybe he and I have personalities don't clash. Doesn't mean I'm going to forget about him. I'm just not going to tell him certain things because and that's the way I am. But I got to make sure he's taken care of too, because how many people is he going to affect down the road? So alienating him is alienating people that we don't want to alienate. So we have to remember that sometimes, because we're alphas and we're asked to be in a beta world now. And that's kind of difficult for us to do, is to slow down and think. We're reactionary. We don't think clearly sometimes. We react to things. And that's something I actually have become very good at, is being more open to ideas from other sources, which is kind of how I've got to where I'm at, to be honest. I had a vision in my head, and I went to a training class with one of my board members. And when we left, I said, I was totally wrong. What I wanted to do was absolutely not what we're doing. And she looked at me and said, who are you? Mm-hmm. And I said, I was wrong. Like, I had this vision of how to fix everybody, and I was nowhere near close. And to listen to this person talk, and now I'm like, oh my God, like what I wanted to do was going to be counterproductive. And she literally was staring at me like, who are you? Because before I would have been like, it's my way or the highway. So
again, Eric, thank you for coming on our show, buddy, and being a part of this, and hopefully we'll become a part of your movement as well.
I would love that.
Again, Eric Cochran, y'all look him up, and thank y'all for listening to A Contagious Smile Unstoppable with yours truly over there, the sexy Victoria.
Oh my God.
And I'm just a redneck Michael. Thank y'all.